When many people think of Appalachian history, they think of Daniel Boone crossing the Cumberland Gap, bringing with him European, Anglo, and German people to shape the wilderness. But the lives that shape Appalachian history are much more diverse than that. In this storytelling project, we have folk tales from Anglo origins, but also stories from Syrian, Cherokee, African American, and Italian sources come to life. All these stories shape Appalachian history, especially here in eastern Kentucky. Herein is this weaving of stories from all sorts of Appalachians.
Hey, this is Angie DeBord, and I want you to look at this beautiful leaf. It's that time of year up here in the mountains. And I'm going to tell you today a story that came from Scotland. And I don't talk like that. I don't talk like they do in Scotland. I'm from the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. My family's been there, as far as I know, since time began. The Cherokees are there where I grew up, and my family's French and maybe some Dutch. I've got a family picture of a Dutch great-great-granny with her little shawl on her and her little hair, and they did that tatting. They made pretty lacy things to wear around their necks. Well, now, the way the family stories go, but you know family stories, they can go this way, they can go that way, they can go this way, that way, this way, and some's true, some maybe not so true, but the story, the way it goes is way back when there was two DeBord brothers. That's my last name's DeBord, D-E capital B. That means it's French, that capital B, O-R-D. And they were on with Lafayette, coming over on a boat with him, and then I don't know how they ended up in the Smoky Mountains, but they went way up in the Smoky Mountains down, and they settled by the big river there. And then the Cherokees were all in through here, and a French settlement was in here. And some of the stories is that the French settlement here, they acted as a refuge for the Cherokees during the time of the removal. And if you've not heard about the Trail of Tears, every history book needs to have a lot about that in it, because it's a very important story. But that's what I've heard. And then there was intermarriage, and I've got a ancient grandmother who was supposedly Cherokee, and they did, you know, when they recorded the names on the tribal rolls, they would, the ones who were recording it couldn't always spell out the Cherokee names, so they'd just make up something, and they just put Hannah Black down, I think, for one of my grandmothers, and then the other, you'll see these long Cherokee names, and then DeBord for a last name. So it's interesting to look through the Dawson rolls and the different rolls from the Cherokee. But, you know, I couldn't prove to you how much or if any Cherokee blood I got in me, but it's always been interesting to contemplate and think about such a diverse, important thing. I'm in my high school, 65% were Cherokee. You know, it's all my best friends Cherokee. It was a wonderful, wonderful childhood, and I'm very fortunate to grow up in the amazingly beautiful area I grew up in, with the amazing people that I grew up with. So anyway, we've just grown up there. I grew up in a holler with my grandparents. My granny and papa's house was at the mouth of the holler, and my cousins and aunts and uncles' houses were strung up and down that holler. And my granny would stand on her front porch and look up the holler, and she'd say, "You see that?" And she'd look up the holler. She said, "That there is my string of pearls," talking about all of us in the family there. And it was a wonderful way to grow up. And I grew up hearing stories and things to make us behave. Granny would always say, if you don't behave, I'm going to send you up there on the mountain to live with Becky Booger. You can just be her little girl. What Granny didn't know is I wanted to go live with Becky Booger. They said she lived in an old holler log, and I thought, now that would be kind of fun, you know, to get to go up and be on that holler and let my hair get all wild and not have to brush it and not have to wash my face and not have to wash my feet. And I could just have the best life ever was as Becky Booger up on the mountain with Becky Booger. Be her little girl. But I didn't. But I sort of live like that now. I live up on a mountain in Scott County, Virginia. My husband and I have an old farmhouse way up on a mountain. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start telling you this story. And I heard a woman, real Scotswoman. She came from Scotland, and I heard her tell this story. And I, of course, switched it around some and made it a mountain story because I'm a mountain girl. So, this story, have you ever known anybody who was just an old grouch and did nothing but complain day and night? There was always something wrong. This feller, he complained a lot. He was always complaining. His belly was aching. He didn't have the money to pay his rent. Something was wrong with his car. There was just something wrong every minute. So he was complaining and complaining to this man. And the man said, well, you know what? I've heard there's this wise woman way, 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 way yonder. And she can give you what you need. She can fix you right up. And that old feller said, well, why didn't nobody ever tell me that? Nobody ever tells me nothing. I work so hard. I've worked my fingers to the bone, and all in the world I got bony fingers. Nobody tells me, okay, I'll go see her. So the old man set out, and he traveled for a year, a month, and a day. And he come to this cave. And he got close to that cave, and he could smell something. Phew, whew. Oh my goodness. And he said, hello, hello. And out from that cave poked the head of the mangiest critter this old man had ever seen. Why, this had old bloody gums and sharp teeth and matted hair. Oh, it smelled so bad. And he came out, kind of slithered over to that man, and he growled. Growl. Pitiful, pitiful. And the old man said, well, hello there. And the thing there said, growl. And the man realized, well, that's a wolf. Poorest looking wolf he had ever seen in his life. So, the wolf asked him, where are you going? And the old man told him, said, well, I've had the worst luck. Said, I've had the worst luck. And he went into a big way of complaining about his luck and told about the wise woman that he was going to go find her. And that poor old wolf said, well, if you find her, will you ask her why I can't seem to thrive? I just can't get any meat on my bones, and I just feel awful all the time. And the man said, I will. And he left the wolf there. And he traveled on, and he traveled on. He traveled for a year, a month, and a day. And he come to this big, wide, green valley. And that valley just stretched on. And down in it, there was a little house, prettiest little old rock house with a red roof and smoke coming out of the chimney. And he walked down closer, and there come out of the house the prettiest girl he had ever seen. She had long curly hair, and she was carrying a big old blueberry pie to set out on the table to cool. And she asked him to come over and sit down, and she got to talking to him, and he got to complaining like he did, and he told her where he was headed. And she said, oh, could you maybe ask the wise woman why I'm so lonesome in my heart all the time? I just always feel so lonesome. And the old man said, yeah, I'll ask her. I'll remember to ask her that. And she said, oh, thank you so much. So the old man sat out, and he traveled and he traveled. How long did he travel? You can say it now. A year, a month, and a day. And he come to this tree. Oh, mercy, it was up on a hill, and that tree was so twisted up. It was just all gnarled up, and it had 3 little leaves right here on it. And one of the leaves just dropped down to the ground while he was talking to it. And he got to talking to the tree and telling the tree about all his troubles and where he was going, and had this wise woman, she's going to fix him up and everything's going to be all right. And that old tree said, reckon you could ask that wise woman why I can't seem to thrive, I can't seem to grow or get no nourishment. The old man said, yeah, I'll ask her why you can't thrive. And he lit out, and he traveled, and he traveled, and he traveled for a year and a month and a day, and he went up a high hill, and there, finally, at last, was the wise woman. And she come out on the porch to greet him and told him howdy. And he said, howdy do. And she said, well, have a seat, son. And he sat down on the seat beside her, and what do you think he started doing? Complaining. He complained about the trip he had been on and about what he had to eat, and he went on and on and on, and he said, but I was told that maybe you could help me, you could fix me so my life wouldn't be so hard. And she said, well, you just need to find joy. And he said, where's joy? And she said, well, just open your eyes and look. Said, look at the trees and the colors in them. Listen to the water streaming down the mountain. Look at the children a-laughing. Why, there's joy all around you. All in the world you've got to do is just open your eyes and see your blessings. And the old man said, open my eyes and see my blessings. She said, that's it. That's all you got to do. So he set out, and he traveled back. And he traveled for a year, a month, and a day, and he came to that poor old tree, and that tree had two leaves left on it, and he led into telling that tree all about seeing that wise woman, and all that she had told him what he needed to do, that he needed to open his eyes and see his blessings, and one of the leaves fell down, and the tree said, well, did you think to ask her what's wrong with me, why I can't thrive? And the feller said, oh, yeah, I did ask her that. And she said that down there at the foot of you that somebody had buried a big old box of gold pieces, and that it was blocking your roots and keeping you from getting any nourishment. And the tree said, really? He said, yeah, really, but I got to go. I'll see you later. And the old feller set out. And he traveled for a year, a month, and a day. And he come to that deep valley. And there was that pretty little house with the red roof. And he got closer and closer, and he, hello! And here came that pretty girl out. This time she was carrying a rhubarb pie. And she set it down on the table. And he came and he sat down at the table, and he started telling her all about seeing that wise woman, what the wise woman had told him, that all he needed to do was open his eyes and he'd find joy, that he'd find it. And she said, oh, that's just wonderful. I'm so happy for you. I hate to ask, but did you think to ask him what's wrong with me? Why? How come I'm so lonesome in my heart? He said, oh, yeah, I did remember to ask her that. And she said what you need to do is find you a feller and just get your feller to live here with you. And she said, oh, well, you're a feller. He said, yeah, I gotta go. And he headed out, and he traveled for a year, a month, and a day. And he come to that cave. And that cave, oh, whoosh, he smelled it before he got to it. And he called on that old wolf, and that old wolf come a-crawling out on his belly. And his face is all snarled up, and he has one tooth here and no teeth over here, bless his heart, and had mangy spots, and his hair was missing, and he crawled out on his belly, could barely move. And that old man, he started talking. He talking about going seeing that wise one, talking about what all that wise woman had said. And the wolf said, well, did you happen to ask her what's wrong with me? Why I'm in such poor shape? And the old man said, oh, yeah, I remember I did ask that. And he said, well, what did she say? Well, she said you just needed you a good meal with lots of protein. So the wolf ate him. End of the story.